Oh, we have a preview for the new banners coming out, but these might be a giant bait, so let's talk about them. Let's talk about the character banner first because I feel like Yae Miko and Layla will be fresh in everyone's mind, thanks to the adventures of Genshin Room. The 4 stars on this banner are okay. We've got 2 shielders in Thoma and Layla, and then we have Heizou as an Animo Catalyst user. Historically, Thoma hasn't been very good, but this stylish housekeeper has found a resurgence in a lot of Burgeon teams. This is because he applies Pyro at a slower rate than most other Pyro characters, allowing fast applying Hydro characters like Xingqiu or Yulan to produce plenty of Dendro cores so that he can blow them up, though using him outside of a Burgeon team doesn't really feel very good. Now Heizou's interesting because he's kind of like Sucrose but the inverse of her, and what I mean by that is both Heizou and Sucrose are Animo Catalyst users, but Sucrose is more focused on grouping, team buffs, and increasing your team damage through a lot of swirl and AoE, whereas Heizou is designed more for his own personal damage and not the team damage so much. His grouping capabilities only come from his burst, and in fact he tends to knock enemies away more than he does group them thanks to his skill and his charge attacks. And then we have Layla, our favorite sleepy scholar and twirly whirly shroom trainer. Wow, try saying that 10 times fast. Layla's character design is absolutely on point, but just like Candace, whose character design was also amazing, I feel like she's gonna have the same amount of usefulness, which is unfortunately not very high with better options available. Layla is a cryo shielder with some offensive capability, being that she can shoot little cryo hailstones at enemies. But from the trailer we see that these attacks happen very slowly, so she probably has very low cryo application. And because they happen so slowly, unless she has gigantic scalings, then she's not going to be doing a lot of damage either. With her elemental application and damage likely being very low, then the next thing that we have to think about is her shield. And her shield would have to be really good to use her over a character like Diona who can shield and heal. Everything about her design screams support, and it's very likely that her personal damage and normal attacks will be very bad, and because she is a sword character, she will probably be best with something like a Favonius sword to recharge her team's energy. So the 4 stars here are kinda and I wouldn't recommend them for newer players, but let's talk about the 5 stars next. Let's go over the teasing Shrine Priestess Kitsune herself, Yae Miko. Yae got a lot better thanks to Dendro, but it actually didn't solve a lot of her problems. What I mean by that is that the Dendro element made Yae's damage go way up, but the clunkiness and problems of using Yae still remain. Both her skill and her burst still have the same problems that you'll have to work around if you want to use Yae to her full effect. Yae's gameplay revolves around summoning little turrets individually, and these turrets will link to each other and shoot little thunderbolts at enemies. Her elemental burst is a very high damaging attack with a 90 energy cost and 22-second cooldown that also destroys all of the turrets on the field. But in doing so, her burst does 1 extra instance of damage for each of the turrets destroyed, meaning that after you use your elemental burst, you have to resummon your turrets again. And so Yae's playstyle is inherently a bit tedious. Resummoning all of your turrets every time you do an elemental burst feels like it should be unnecessary because it takes a lot of time to summon all 3 of them. And if you have to reposition one because the enemies are too far away, you have to reposition all of them. Her elemental burst also has a very high energy cost of 90 and a long cooldown of 22 seconds. This makes using her very strong elemental burst kind of difficult because it's got such a long cooldown and such a high energy cost. The introduction of the aggravate reaction using Electro and Dendro does make Yae feel better, at least in the overworld, because things tend to die really quickly. So her problems feel less significant when you're just exploring or going around the world, but when you're in the abyss or in a domain where you have to do a rotation multiple times, that's when her problems start to come out. So if you're pulling for Yae for gameplay reasons or to try to make your account stronger, just keep these considerations in mind because these are the problems you're going to have to solve. Now let's talk about everyone's favorite whale summoner, Tartaglia. Tartaglia is a very good character, but he is a bit finicky to use. If you can get his timing and rotations down, he feels pretty good to play, but if you go outside the tight timing or rotation windows, he punishes you pretty severely. His bow form isn't very good. He's all about using his skill to switch into his stance to use the dual water swords. In fact, the only thing you'll probably do in his base bow form is use his elemental burst because it applies Riptide to enemies and refunds him energy. Riptide is a little mark on enemies that deals AoE Hydro damage when triggered. It also has its own instance of Hydro application, so between Tartaglia's normal attacks, his charge attacks, and his Riptide, he can apply a lot of Hydro. So Tartaglia serves as a very good applicator for Hydro for teams that really want lots of Hydro, like the International team, one of the best teams in the entire game. That team uses Tartaglia, Xiangling, Kazuha, and Bennett. Tartaglia's role is to apply a bunch of Hydro so Xiangling can vaporize every single hit, and you've also got Bennett's huge attack buff and healing, and Kazuha's grouping and elemental resistance shred to help you out too. But Tartaglia's Hydro application also makes him very good for electrocharge teams or even freeze teams. What you have to be careful of with Tartaglia is that his skill has a variable cooldown. The longer you stay in his sword stance, the longer the cooldown is going to be. So ideally you want to stay in his sword stance for only about 6 seconds, but it's not exactly like there's a timer for that, so you just have to get used to that amount of time in your head. If you stay in for much longer and miss out on the timing for your elemental skill to be up when all the bursts for all the rest of your team are up, then you're going to miss out on a lot of damage while you're waiting for that skill to come back. In this way, Tartaglia really rewards players who want to do tight execution and good rotations, but kind of punishes players who don't exactly do that. And I want to give you another comparison between Tartaglia and Yae Miko, so let me compare them to another type of gameplay style. Tartaglia is sort of like a rogue or an assassin. He does a lot of damage but in a very short window, and you have to be very precise with how you use him. Yae Miko is more like a wizard or like a black mage. She does a lot of damage all at once and maybe a little bit of damage with some little familiars here and there, but it's all about ramping up for that one big hit. So if either of those playstyles suit you, then these characters might suit you as well, but as always, make sure to use them in the trials and see how much fun you're having with them. The character test runs are a good place to see if you enjoy playing the character, but don't look at the numbers. The numbers are always skewed. They always give the characters weird artifact sets, and they always give them their signature weapon. So don't look at the total damage as whether or not you should pull for a character in the test runs. Just see if you like playing them. So let's give a verdict to these character banners now. Overall, I'd say these banners are pretty bad for newer players, but they're pretty decent for players who already have established teams and want to try different types of team compositions. So if you already have a couple really strong teams and want to try something like Burgeon Thoma or something like an on-field Yae Aggravates, then maybe these banners would be nice for you. If you're looking to fill out slots for your team because you don't have a lot of characters, these characters aren't super impactful to anyone's account, so I'd maybe save your Primogems for the upcoming banners instead. Because we have Scaramouche as an Animo 5-star coming up in 3.3, and Animo is the best element in the game, and having a 5-star Animo character is probably going to be very good. And we're also expecting Raiden to come out in 3.3 because, well, we've had an Archon every patch so far. 3.0 was Zhongli, 3.1 was Venti, 3.2 is Nahida, and 3.3 will probably be Raiden to keep that trend up. And of course there's also the Raiden Scaramouche pairing there, so that's probably another reason why they'll be together. But we'll get official confirmation soon on who's coming up in the next banners. So again, for the character banner, kinda mid, but if you have a bunch of characters already and have a really good team established, or a really good couple teams established, just want some extra filler characters that you like that might be fun, then maybe you could roll for this banner. Next though, let's talk about the weapon banner, because this is actually pretty interesting. In fact, I would say the weapon banner is both better and more interesting than the character banner altogether. However, the weapon banners are a gigantic trap, so I would definitely avoid rolling on a weapon banner unless you have tons of extra Primogems and don't want any of the upcoming characters that have been teased or revealed. The weapons on this banner include the Kagura's Verity, the Polar Star, Stringless, Favonius Sword, Favonius Codex, Dragonsbane, and the Bell. Basically, every weapon on this banner is good to very good except for the Bell. That is the one thing that is a giant trap and a very, very sad thing to see. Otherwise, this banner would be really good, but the inclusion of the Bell makes it a little sus. The Favonius series is incredibly useful because your energy and elemental burst are so important in this game. And having weapons that not only reduce the equipping character's energy recharge requirements, but your team's energy recharge requirements, because of the particles it generates, is very useful. The Stringless is a really good weapon for characters like Venti and Fischl that want to build elemental mastery and where most of their damage comes from their elemental skill and elemental burst. In fact, for a character like Venti, the Stringless can rival a lot of 5-star weapons. Dragonsbane is a really good weapon for characters like Xiangling, Reverse Melt Rosaria, or even Burgeon Thoma. And both the Polar Star and Kagura's Verity are very good 5-star weapons. They're very versatile and useful for a lot of different characters, so either one of them is a pretty good pull. And then of course the Bell is one of the worst weapons ever made, so if you get it, Sorry. But overall, this weapon banner has a lot more good than bad. The Favonius sword is probably one of the most useful weapons for everyone, while weapons like the Stringless and Dragonsbane are a little more niche, but they're very powerful with specific characters and specific team comps. Both of the 5-star weapons are really nice, and if you're just pulling because you want 5-star weapons, not because you want a specific 5-star weapon, then these might be nice for you too. So again, I'd say this banner is more for mid to high adventure rank players who already have a couple teams established. You don't really want to be pulling on a weapon banner unless you have several characters in your roster that can use the weapons on the banner. And you also don't want to be pulling on a weapon banner if you're saving your Primogems for a specific character, because the weapon banner will just drain your Primogems so quickly. So the overall rating for this banner patch is that they're okay. The character banners are alright, they're kind of meh to be honest, but the weapon banner is pretty good looking. However, I still think this might be a giant bait right before patch 3.3. I know a lot of people have been waiting for Raiden's rerun, and since we don't have an official announcement on when that will be, but we're expecting it to be 3.3, I think they're placing banners like this right before her rerun to drain the Primogems of anyone who wants her, so that people are more enticed to spend. We should know for sure who's coming on the banners in about 2 weeks during the 3.3 livestream, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Anyways, please let me know your thoughts. I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen a weapon banner that's looked this good, but it might be on the cusp of having a really good character banner in the next patch. I have another video coming out today, but I wanted to get this one out as soon as I saw the banner preview. I know there's going to be a lot of people wondering on whether they should pull or not, and honestly, unless your account has a lot of good characters or several characters that can really carry your team, I wouldn't wish on this banner. None of the characters are really game breaking, and the weapons are really nice on the weapon banner, but several of them are pretty niche. And I think if you're going to spend your Primogems, you either go all in for something you really want, or wish on banners that give you the best chance to significantly improve your account. Anyways everyone, love you, stay jawsome, and I'll see you in the next one.